Stare into the Light. Written by Jordan Scarrott. Narrated by Ben Cooper. I sat, still and idle, chewing a plastic pen while staring at an open textbook that lay on the desk before me. My eyes scanned the words that ran across its pages. However, my brain wasn't taking any of it in, despite my best efforts. The harder I tried to continue reading the page, the more unknown the letters became to me. They began to twist and turn. The black ink letters slowly became more and more alien. It felt as if I was hopefully trying to translate some ancient scripture written in an unknown dead language. I sighed heavily as I leaned back into my chair and rubbed my heavy eyes. I stretched out a hand to reach for a cup of cold coffee that sat upon my desk. After gulping down the cold, milky liquid, I stared back at the textbook to see the English words had returned. I shook my head and slowly closed the book. Tiredness was getting the better of me, and the hour was late. The endless city lights that sat outside my window drew my aimless stare. There was something mesmerizing about it. Dazzling whites and oranges shone from the buildings which stretched out towards the ever-reaching horizon. I suppose it reminded me of the night sky I saw back in the countryside, filled with starlight and wonder. However, here no starlight shone. The light pollution from the city blocked out this beautiful silver light from above. I sat still for a while, fixated on the city's lights beyond my window. My personal phone suddenly rang out, and in a mad panic I was brought out of my trace I found myself in. I frantically patted myself down in a crazed flurry to find my phone, before whipping out the small device from my jacket pocket, taking a second to read the caller ID. Edison Ellenard, or as he was more commonly called by his peers, Eddie. A fellow student and a good friend. We had first met when we enrolled for the Academy of Sciences a couple of years ago, and have remained friends ever since. Good evening, Eddie. What can I do for you? I said as I answered the phone, leaning back once more in my chair. Dustin, I need you to come round right away. I've made an amazing discovery. Meet me ASAP. With that, Eddie ended the call, and I was left with a silent phone to my ear. I put the phone back in my pocket. God damn it, Eddie, I whispered to myself as I looked at my wristwatch, glumly. It's 1 a.m, man, I said to myself before I stood up and swiped my keys off the desk before exiting my one-bedroom apartment. I was still quite excited to see what Eddie's new discovery was, despite the annoyance of being demanded of at such a late hour. There was no doubt about the fact that he was indeed a genius, and every time he called me, it meant his intelligence had led him to a new and exciting conclusion. I made my way briskly down the flight of stairs that lay within the centre of the apartment building, narrowly avoiding a collision with someone as I turned a tight corner. Within minutes, I found myself out on the cold city streets once again, the pavement illuminated brightly by LED lampposts. I stared up at one of them and shielded my eyes against the harsh light, then continued to follow the winding pavement to Eddie's own apartment block. I turned my gaze upward as I approached the large grey complex. This particular building stood proud and ugly during the daylight hours, and was renowned for being a sore on the eyes. However, under the veil of darkness, the dark grey building blended into the black, starless night. I walked up to the entrance of the block and placed a finger on a small button that lay to my right. Next to it read Apartment 64, and the name Eleanor was scribbled in messy handwriting. After a brief moment, Eddie's distorted voice came through the small speaker, situated within the brickwork. "Let you in now, Dustin." A loud click could be heard as the lock on the entrance opened, after which I pushed a large door and made my way into the complex. Eddie's apartment block was very similar to the one in which I resided. The entire layout was flooded with harsh yellow light from the multitude of fittings that were fastened onto the walls and ceiling, which remained on at all hours, often confusing you as to which time of day it was. A worn stairway spiraled upwards through the centre of the block, and different apartments were situated around this stairway on multiple floors. I made my way up onto the first floor, where Eddie's flat was situated, and I knocked firmly on the door, staring at the 1 silver 6 that remained on his flat number. Slowly the door opened ajar, and a chain on the other side was pulled tight. 2 eyes peeped round and stared at me. "Eddie, it's me, Dustin." In a flash, Eddie unlocked the door and ushered me in quickly. I was surprised to find myself in almost complete darkness. The only light provided was that of a few candles littered about the small apartment. "Bloody hell, Eddie, it's a bit dark, isn't it?" I said to him, as I instinctively went to flick the light switch. "No, don't!" Eddie cried out, as he pulled my arm downwards, preventing me from turning the lights on. I stared at him in bewilderment. "Trust me, it's to do with what I have to show you," he continued. A semi-nervous tone rang through his words, but I dismissed it as nothing. "Let's see it then," I said to him. Eddie turned and followed him down the short, narrow corridor, then left into his living room. This room was completely blacked out, except for the faint flicker of candlelight. He ushered me to come and sit down on the sofa. Across from me, standing on a coffee table, stood a turned-off, simple desk lamp. Curiously, several cables ran from the lamp into a laptop, which also rested on the sofa. Eddie sat down also, and began to tap at the keys, and adjusted the lamp on the table slightly, and pointed its bulb directly at me. I sat, silent and patient, still slightly confused as to what Eddie was going to show me. Suddenly, the desk lamp glowed bright white. I squinted as the light violently pierced my unsuspecting eyes. Then, after several seconds, the light went out again. I scratched my forehead. "So, what is it that you discovered, then?" "Tell me the first thing that you think of. Now." "What?" "Now, off the top of your head." I paused for a moment. Then, out of nowhere, I replied, "Battered Mars bars and cabbage." We were silent for a moment, before I chuckled to myself. Don't ask me where that came from. Eddie grinned with delight, before saying, "That was my discovery, Dustin." I replied, hastily, "Battered Mars bars and cabbage is your discovery?" "Oh no, it's much more than that. Look," Eddie said, as he flipped round his laptop to face me. I leaned over and took hold of the small computer, then placed it on my lap. The screen showed complex coding and a variety of different waveforms. I took a moment to scan the mess of data. Well, this looks like some form of modulation software to me, I said to him. Exactly right, he replied. I've modulated light waves, actual physical light waves, in order to communicate data. Similarly to how we modulate other waves on the electromagnetic spectrum for communication. Take radio waves for example. We modulate them in order to send information to different places across the world. So what you're saying is you modulated the light waves coming from the lamp to feed information to me that told me to think of Mars bars and cabbage? Yes, and I know that may seem trivial, but I've conducted this experiment many times on unknowing subjects, and every time without fail they act out whatever is the modulated light waves told them to do.